Hello everyone, welcome to our Future Art Ecosystems 2 Live with Robin McNicholas. My name is Alex Boyce and I work within the Arts Technologies team as an R&D platform producer at Serpentine Galleries. This conversation this evening is part of our Phase 2 Live series where we speak to our contributors that have helped us release a recent publication, Future Art Ecosystems 2 Art by Metaverse, or Phase 2 for short. And we do this to invite our audiences to gain insight in terms of the research practice, as ordinarily this is a closed research report, and this way you get to meet our contributors directly. This evening's live welcomes co-founder and creative director Robin McNicholas from Experiential art collective Marshmallow Laser Feast, or I will be referring it to MLF for short from now on. MLF are known for their multidisciplinary artworks like Dream, In the Eyes of the Animal, and We Live in an Ocean of Air, among many others, and I hope to politely probe Robin about these in more detail. For info, we post-produce and capture all our lives and post them via Serpentine YouTube, so do try to enjoy the conversation and get involved in the chat via Twitch, because you can always pick up on the finer details at a later stage. You can also watch our previous lives with artists like Sam Rolfes, David Blandy and Larry Achapong, as well as Amelia Winger-Berskin via YouTube. And next week's live is a special freeze edition, Monday 11th of October from 6 p.m. with Maggie Roberts of Orphan Drift on artificial intelligence and interspecies communication. Gosh, I always have to sound that out. Specifically octopuses. But Future Art Ecosystems 2. So Future Art Ecosystems, or FAE, is an annual strategic briefing launched in 2020 that provides concepts, references, language, and arguments for 21st century cultural infrastructure. The first version of FAE, Future Art Ecosystems Arts by Advanced Technologies, addressed the implications of artistic engagements with advanced technology in terms of interstructural redesign that they enable within and in parallel to existing art ecosystems. Future Art Ecosystems Art by Metaverse focuses on the larger stakes involved in revamping digital strategy at cultural institutions and the advent of the Metaverse, an online, always persistent spatial second world that represents a fundamental shift in our notion of digital infrastructure and presence. And whilst I'm on introductions, I also want to introduce Tamar Clark-Brown, our commissions producer, who is assisting me this evening, as well as Ralph Pritchard, our tech manager. And our lovely BSL assistants, Paragin Kaylee and Karen Green. For those watching at home, we'll be doing BSL swaps around 15 minutes throughout the conversation, so just to take notice of that as well. Those that are absent this evening from the Serpentine team include Eva Yeager, Associate Curator, Arts Technologies, Kay Watson, Head of Arts Technologies, Ben Vickers, Strategist at Large, and Victoria Ivanova, R&D Strategic Lead. Also, for those who need closed captions this evening, you need to click the little CC option at the bottom right frame of Twitch to have it activated. And also, please do get involved in the Twitch chat. Tamar will be taking questions to redirect them towards myself and Robin towards the tail end of the conversation. And a reminder that if you want to participate in that, you'll need a Twitch account. So we'll be dropping instructions for that in the chat as well. It's super quick and easy to sign up, and it's free. But back to Robin. So Robin, I've stolen this from the Australian International Documentary Conference. I'm biased, I'm Australian, I have to do things like that. But this is a short introduction to Robin. And then afterwards, Robin, I'd really like to ask you, particularly from a non-arts perspective, what you do professionally and the studio at large as well. But to start, co-founder and creative director of the award-winning creative studio Marshmallow Laser Feast, Robin has directed a myriad of VR experiences, large-scale installations, and live performances. Marshmallow Laser Feast is a London-based experiential studio working at the intersection of technology, art, and science, always looking to create experiences that immerse and amaze in unexpected ways. MLF employs a wealth of creative disciplines, from photoreal virtual reality to robotic performance and real-time mapping, to push boundaries, redefine expectations, and excite audiences worldwide. Also, just to say, such a huge privilege to speak to you, Robin. I've been a massive fan of MLF for such a long time. But yes, to start, how do you describe what you do, Robin? and the studio as well, because you do so much.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me to talk this evening. And um, I think it's great what Serpentine are doing, having these conversations. In terms of what Marshmallow Laser Feast do, I'll also refer to us as MLF from here on out. Um, it's a multidisciplinary creative collective. We have years gone by accumulated lots of experience working in the film industry, in the music industry, and lots of our passion projects have been bootstrapped by working with museums. Experiential works have manifested with MLF's name on somewhere all over the place. And so what we've really focused on is making sure that there's always a beating heart, which is the passion projects that we create and tour. And they visit all kinds of different cultural and arts organizations, sometimes festivals, sometimes galleries, and sometimes online. And so we have found ourselves for years being interested in mixed reality, in using technology to express ourselves creatively, and have found ourselves at this point in time with kind of ratification for stuff like the Metaverse being spoken in more kind of mainstream circles. And so I'm really interested to chat today about that and how we fit into that and what our interests are.
I was going to mention, Robin, because catching up with you last week, what really resonated and stuck out in my mind is how you spoke about your studio operating in a really organic nature. And doing research for the report, a lot of my role is sort of proposing who we should interview for future art ecosystems for this specific one around the metaverse. And I wanted you to sort of highlight, if you could, how MLF distinguishes itself from other sort of collectives or studios using similar technologies.
I think what connects us is there's a curiosity and a passion to create new experiences for audiences. And we've realized that using technology, we can engage with audiences in completely new ways and find new storytelling techniques, new experiential processes that allow us to craft environments where you can have control of how a space smells, what it feels like. And even though it's a relatively overused word these days, but we're very passionate about this sense of immersion, about allowing audiences to lose themselves in the work. Sorry, I would add that it's an organic process as well. There's lots of interdisciplinary relationships, and the way we realize our work relies heavily on the technical team that we have in-house. It's hugely collaborative, and the production team also become part of the creative process. I would say that we're not necessarily individualistic in the sense that traditional arts and artists with a central individual focus, our work emerges from a collective effort. And I think that is expressed in gaming companies, in film productions, in theatre. And actually, a lot of the art world, of course, is hugely collaborative as well. And that expands into the relationship between artists, makers, and the curators and cultural spaces.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, a thing that we're always keenly interested in the arts tech team is sort of, at least from an art historical perspective, moving away from that master artist framework to sort of the collective, and even like within like collectives are working with each other as well. But on that, and this might be a more institutional worded question, but in terms of like the nuts and bolts of how MLF operates, how is it governed or structured in terms of decision making? Is there a board? Is there like a CEO? Is there a tribunal of producers?
Yeah, there's a board. There are shareholders. We operate as a business, and we have done for a number of years. And I think just the nature of the work that we take on and put into the world, it's hugely expensive. You require really highly technical, skilled individuals. These freelancers often are really expensive, have huge day rates, and similarly, the hardware, the software licenses, things like that are also huge barriers in terms of funding MLF purely through the Arts Council, let's say, or other public organisations. So we've bootstrapped the work a lot in the past. We've worked as commercial directors, and honestly, it does us good because we learn within that sector what we really love. And the collaborative environment, it's still as valid, and it's extraordinary how quick the turnaround like gives you this kind of extraordinary, it just educates you very quickly. And but similarly, we've had NHD students come through our doors. We've worked with different public sector organizations a lot, so it's hybridized. The reason why we still go about our hybridized work is that, well, the scene is still crystallizing, and there's various attempts to put business models behind it and create ticketed experiences that are the sole kind of driving force behind what we do. But honestly, the scene is still in its infancy, and with stuff like the pandemic in the mix as well, it just slightly delays the crystallization of that scene.
And Robin, on that sort of, I'm going to steal your words of non-linear. I think what really comes out consistently in Fade 2 is we call it sort of non-passive spectatorship. But I wanted to know from, in your own words, because you're just talking about hybridization, and I know you come from more of a performance background, even though obviously you're working in visual arts as well. But when MLF says non-linear storytelling, what does that mean?
I think it means non-traditional storytelling. And obviously, well, I would start by saying that traditional storytelling in terms of printed books and theatre and film are set institutions that, of course, within the different silos are so varied and diverse in the way in which stories are told. But some of the new technologies and, the fact that the surge of digital literacy as more and more people online engage in social interactions, in cultural interactions with connected devices, there's new literacy and there's new experiences to be had and different ways audiences are spending time. And we feel strongly that our role within the arts and culture space is to present our work to those audiences that are digitally literate, and potentially those who are not, that might be interested.
Yeah, I find what's really intriguing and it's just interesting about MLF is the way that you approach storytelling, and then the ways in which that storytelling appears. When we interviewed you the first time, we spoke quite in a lot of detail around Dream. That was part of that Audiences of the Future challenge. But then I know more recently you've got a project on, and I want to do a quick shout out to Phi Centre in Montreal, because we were speaking about that with Laria Achapong during our previous live interview. But MLF has a project on at Phi Centre in Montreal at the moment. That's correct, right?
That's right. We're really over the moon to be showing We Live in an Ocean of Air. That in, let me get the dates right, 2019, we were showing it at the Saatchi Gallery in London. And it's places, venues, organisations like the Phi Centre that are really a beacon of hope for the experiential scene, the XR scene. And yeah, that's showing until January next year. And we're just really pleased to be bringing that to audiences. But I think going back to the previous question, we're interested in experiential storytelling. You know, there's an element of wordlessness and discovery that you can hand over in an interactive work, in a real-time work that is created in a games engine that allows for the role of the audience member to be different to that of a passive audience sitting in a seat watching a screen, or a broadcast of some sort. And there's quite nuanced ways to engage and hand over in an interactive work like We Live in an Ocean of Air that uses lots of technology, but the whole point of it is to allow that technology to completely disappear. We use sensors in We Live in an Ocean of Air, heart rate monitors and breath sensors, as well as VR headsets and scent and a whole rig of fans that are situated above the audience's heads. And all of these work together to engage the audience in a different way. And there is a sense of wordlessness, of a shared experience that we're only beginning to discover how powerful that is, and lift the lid on the potential of it.
I had the privilege of seeing We Live in an Ocean of Air when I was doing some sort of R&D work for the Francis Crick Institute, because they were really interested in how to effectively implement VR for science communication. But what was so striking, I mean, apart from the artwork itself, the smell thing for me was really exciting, but a really important part of it was the invigilation. Your invigilators on that particular artwork, they were so caring, and the attention to detail with the onboarding, particularly like there was audience members that I was watching it as people were going in as well. There was audience members that hadn't done VR before. There were audience members that needed extra guidance because their mobility wasn't the same. But every single audience member coming out of that really loved that. My question to you is, with this work in sort of like a post-pandemic context, how did it shift or change? Was the visitor throughput edited in any capacity? Because, I mean, the thing about this artwork is it was people coming in, it was very tactile and hands-on, etc. I was just very interested to know what the format is looking like now at the Phi Centre in Montreal.
Yeah, the process of watching the performance of visitors engage in the work was we treated it very carefully. It was really moving, and you're right, it was hugely important. The invigilation was a very sensitive area. We wanted to limit the amount of dialogue. We wanted to make sure that people felt like they were in safe hands. And, you know, obviously different audiences have got different levels of experience, especially when it comes to wearing VR headsets and things like that. And just generally, you know, wearing a VR headset in a communal space with other potential strangers is there's a duty of care, I suppose. Um, but there's also a really beautiful performance it plays out that I think is it enhances the experience and becomes part of the work as well. And at the Phi Centre in Montreal, no, we haven't had to adapt the throughput. We have, of course, had to be really majorly vigilant about the health and safety. Fortunately, when it comes to the Phi Centre, they've had an experience that they have put on called the Infinite, which is made by Felix and Paul, that takes people onto the ISS, the International Space Station, and that's for huge numbers of visitors, and they've had to really perfect the art of sanitization of headsets and reassurance. And in terms of visitor care, you or I would expect at the very least for a sanitized, safe VR headset if we're going to engage in any kind of communal VR work. Fortunately, with people like the Phi Centre, they've got that covered, and we can get on with focusing on the experience itself and just making sure that people feel empowered, and people can take out of it. We had lots of repeat visitors. We had lots of people sobbing, which was a weird kind of unexpected reaction to what the piece presents. And of course, that's one of the driving factors when we get a sense that it's emotionally engaging audiences, then it's a lovely thing, and just drives us to allow for people to experience that kind of work and take from it what they want in a kind of in a safe and hopefully artistically engaging space.
It must be exciting to sort of, as it becomes live and you get audience responses, seeing the variation in audiences geographically, but also I've got the fee page, my accent kills everything. I've got it open at the moment, and it has that visualization of the breath and breathing. Like, it was such breathing, and the lungs was such a topic of sort of the COVID era, but this is quite exciting to see in a post-pandemic era. Like, we should be celebrating breathing as well in a new creative capacity through the work as well.
I think that's it. It's important for us to just lift the veil and allow the technology to reveal some of these processes that, and to expose the human being as a living organism and ask questions like where the human body begins and where it ends. And, I think that there are some wonderful possibilities presenting themselves for future experiences like this. The level of detail, the kind of cinematic qualities. I'm skirting around the production values, but they're just improving and getting lighter, more comfortable, and things like that. I try and distance myself from getting too kind of tech zeitgeist heavy, because I think even in the blurb you read at the start, there's a lot whenever creative practitioners are engaging in technology, there's lots of a narrative of pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
But I think we're at a stage now where we're like, do you know what? We're comfortable with these boundaries, and we're just going to refine and focus in on what we want people to feel in a space as well.
I kind of feel like artist bios are quite of an artwork in themselves, but always great to start off an interview. Robin, from a more practical perspective, this is a touring artwork. I wanted to know, how important is touring from MLF's perspective? And when it comes to producing an artwork, are you thinking about touring from the onset of the artwork being conceived, or is is it something that, I mean, in terms of We Live in an Oceanair, was it seeded at the start? Did it come about as happenstance or an intervention from speaking to a potential collaborator? How does MLF approach touring within its business model?
Yeah, we do. We think about touring as a kind of central driving factor. We have a wonderful human being called Andrew Stone, who was previously at the Science Museum, whose focus is just touring. He was out in Montreal with We Live in the Ocean of Air recently. And yes, it's hugely important because of these because of the way we fund our work. Sometimes we get investment, sometimes we bootstrap, sometimes it's funded through cultural entities or hybridized. Really varies, but there is a touring aspect. And whenever a work can tour, well, that's a better thing. And we've learned the hard way. We've created things like we have a laser forest that weighs tons and takes days to install and is not necessarily tourable. Similarly, a project called A Colossal Wave, we had to close roads, hire cranes, and erect huge shipping containers to exhibit the work. And, you know, there are opportunities to take those works places, but I think more than anything, where we're going and what we've realized and have been mindful of for a number of years now is the fact that our work is adaptable and the fact that our work can take shape in very different forms. So, for example, the project In the Eyes of the Animal originally was a commission by Abandoned Normal Devices, a festival where we exhibited in Grisdale Forest. And we dangled VR headsets. Well, the VR headsets were encased in these helmets that were covered in bark and moss and different foliage in a forest for people to discover. And that's one way of engaging in the work. The piece is still touring. It's been all over the world now, and it is shown on Ron Arrad's Curtain, the large cylindrical screen that was created. There's a full dome version that we took to Mutex. A Gear VR app version. I don't know, not many people crack open the Gear VR apps these days, but the point is that practitioners within our space are able to create story worlds, and that's what we do. We create story worlds, and there are different windows into that world, into those worlds. So they can be projection screens or VR headsets or AR or browsers. And I think in that way, we can communicate in very, very varied ways, but in diverse and versatile ways that kind of erode some of the barriers. So they're more accessible, you know, but there are trade-offs. That you can author a work that, say, We Live in an Ocean of Air, we have complete control. It's a black box, and we can really refine the experience down to the feeling under your feet and the smell in the environment at that time. But on the complete opposite side of things is a project like Dream that was browser-based. And you can obviously reach many more people if you are creating a story world that is accessible through a browser.
I was bringing up footage of In the Eyes of the Animal that as you were talking, Rob, and it's one of my favorite works of yours. But when we interviewed you the first time, Dream was sort of the focus because it was part of this Audiences of the Future challenge. I was hoping I've got a brief outline of a description of the project here, but I don't think it does it service. So I'm going to read it out, but I'd love for you to describe it in more detail, and in particular, the amount of project partners that were involved with it, because it's quite remarkable in that sense. But Dream, an online production set in a virtual midsummer forest, performed live from Portsmouth Guildhall in March 2020 2021, Dream is the culmination of a major piece of research and development within the Audience of the Future program, exploring how future audiences will experience live performance. Yeah.
It was, and it was mental. It was an exhausting, hugely adventurous deep dive into a place that I don't think everybody on the project was out of their comfort zone, which is really the perfect distraction for a pandemic, but also we learned a heck of a lot on that project. In essence, it was a live motion capture production, and we were essentially developing an experience for a live found space, and had just recorded the music. The Philharmonia Orchestra had recorded a number of pieces in the Alexander Palace, and I think the day after the recording, lockdown kicked in, and so we had to completely shut down the location-based experience, the bricks and mortar production that wasn't anything like the digital pivot that was shared in March of this year. And what was shared was effectively a production that meant Marshmallow Laser Feast and me as a director working incredibly closely with the Royal Shakespeare Company, Manchester International Festival. We brought Nick Cave in. There was a huge, extraordinary cast some who had never done any motion capture before. It was a huge experiment, and there were loads of risks along the way. And ultimately, we had 7 by 7 meters to present this live work to the internet. We were really, really happy with how many people, over from March the 8th to March the 20th. We managed to draw in 65,000 people, more than 65,000 people, which, I mean, compared to what the numbers that we were getting through at the Saatchi Gallery were so much higher, you know. And so for us as an organization to lift the lid on future potential of reaching audiences, that was quite interesting. I would say the most exciting aspect of Dream was creating the story world in Unreal Engine. Epic Games, who make Fortnite, were one of the partners on the production. And we created a whole forest. It was 7 kilometers by 7 kilometers. And we were able to just express our interests in the natural world through the filter of Shakespeare, in that we were able to craft characters that effectively took the kind of Tinkerbell element away and introduced the wonders of the natural world. That's what at least we were attempting to do with that particular project, and start to explore a virtual forest, take people into the mycelia networks and into the canopy of trees that were all informed by the original Midsummer Night's Dream text. But the forest that we created in itself was a character. It was versatile because it was real time, and we were developing this production in a real time context. We could craft it, and we'd done previous motion capture productions, but they were all kind of painting by number productions where you'd have to plan ahead, get the performers into the ping pong ball suits to do their thing, and then on a timer just blast it out and then clean it all up. But the prospect of bringing live performance capture out into the world, it was really exciting because of the creative potential, the possibilities of allowing actors, performers, to bring their voice in a real-time context, unlike the painting by numbers traditional model of creating a motion capture work. We were able to allow the performers in the space to contribute. And I would say my relationship with Pippa Hill as a creative symbiosis, it was just great because she brought so much expertise as head of literary and as a dramaturg was just extraordinary in guiding me, whilst at the same time, I hope that because I suspect I'm more digitally literate, I was certainly more digitally literate and exposed to different working practices with games engines, with DMX lighting and all of the kind of elaborate behind the scenes show stuff. We were able to work together and craft the kind of characters and environment that we wanted. And of course, there's a huge musical element to it as well. So a big project. It's still streaming on Dream Online, and yeah, I feel very privileged and very kind of grateful to the generous Audience of the Future consortium because I got so much out of it. It's mad.
Yeah, it was, I mean, such a remarkable project. But I guess what I find really fascinating is sort of this contrast between Dream, which was pivoted to more of like an online live performance format. And just to clarify too, when I was experiencing it, my cousin had the VR one on, and I was sort of watching it without VR, but our experiences we were both amazed at what was happening when I watched it the first time. But comparing that to We Live in an Ocean of Air, I was kind of interested from a producer perspective, and particularly because your speciality is live performance, Robin. Which one of these formats are you most excited by, or which one do you gravitate more towards in terms of creating the story world? Is it the immersive sort of on-location access point for a visitor, or is it this more virtual element? Is something that we were really interested in when I don't want to say advocating, interrogating the theory of the metaverse, because it is that persistent online world, but it is a bit of a dystopian ideal in some capacities. But these worlds are not dystopian in any way, shape or form. They're creating new opportunities for storytelling and new ways of accessing different story worlds.
Yeah, I see them as two of the same thing. I see, there's a persistent physical world that is augmented by a digital layer. And I think that, sure enough, the opportunity to craft and refine a physical bricks and mortar space, because we've seen firsthand the impact that can have on audiences, even though those audiences are far limited, that audiences are limited in terms of throughput. We prefer that because you can't guarantee what a person at home and the way a person is engaging in our work through a mobile phone or a browser or a dodgy internet connection, and so to craft and refine the environment allows us to present that story world in the desired way as artists we want to present it. However, that they are one of the same. I think that the pre, during, and post this persistence is just a shift in mindset, and there's an opportunity. It's not really an opportunity. It's just to cut some of the tethers of the past that have been dictated by the absence of technology, the absence of networks and affordability, and there's just new opportunities to iterate as well and to improve on a work. And so to erode models such as in our previous conversation, we talked about traditional film models where you shoot a film, you edit it, you distribute it, you stream it or put it on Blu-ray. They're still putting Blu-rays out. And on our side, we are creating work in a completely different way. In fact, the premiere of the work is great because no one's seen it before. But I think that the pomp and pageantry of the red carpet experience is, it's a thing that society presents. But in terms of the work that we're creating, we learn it and iterate and build on the experiences once they are introduced to the world. And technology improves as well. And so hardware and software and literacy and all of those things coexist and co-evolve and allow our work to improve over time as well. And I think that's a really positive thing that creative practitioners like us are bringing into the space. The fact that, in the eyes of the animal can tour and we can improve it. We can incrementally improve the production values and sound quality and refine the invigilation based on how the work is presented and adapt that work as well according to what kind of audiences it's being presented to.
Yeah, we definitely share similar sentiments for attitude. Within visual arts, it's the exhibition model and moving away from this attitude of it's a fixed production and then it's done and then you move on to the next element. Whereas within this type of work and this type of production, the value comes more from that iterative process of the content, but then also with your collaboration partners too, because it can shrink and expand and take on a life of its own as your projects have been doing. But with that in mind, Robert, and I know this is heavily tied to research and development, I might start with the bigger question of, from a content perspective or production perspective, what does success mean to MLF? And then after you've answered that, I'll shift to more audience perspectives. But yeah, given everything that we've talked about, Robin, how does MLF measure success, or what do you deem as successful in terms of this type of work, given its strong emphasis on iteration and relationship building?
There are different tiers in terms of success, and the metrics are not necessarily attached to kind of analytics. We haven't got a clipboard of immersed individuals and a quota of people who've been through. I think on a personal level, we measure success in our internal organization. We're internally our own kind of, there's a critical entity within MLF that just allows us to push and pull and nurture the productions and I think whenever a production tours and a new location, a new date in the calendar is put in, of course that is seen as a positive. We're less bothered about press, though mindful of the fact that it's required. And I think that on the whole, because there's always a new project being developed in-house, for instance, my primary focus for the last 3 years has been developing a number of different projects, but I've been developing a project with the BFI. And I think that some of the level of success is being in the seat where we are actively developing these new works that are in the category of new forms, and scrutinizing how to execute the work to the highest kind of standard whilst maintaining some kind of cultural relevance as well. And I feel myself skirting around the question, which is, how do you measure success? I don't think financial success is part of it. I don't think audience numbers is, we've lots of friends in the music industry who put a gig on at the Brixton Academy and they're like, ding, okay, job done. There's easier ways to gain audiences, but I think that we're fortunate that the community that we're involved in is relatively small. It's hugely collaborative, and as an organization, MLF is always collaborating with other individuals as well, and generally they're really high-end experts. In the case of Pippa Hill, who is head of literary at the RSC, it just enriches us as an organization. Similarly with the Fraunhofer Institute, that we just made a project that we took to Cannes. It's a medical science visualization institute in Germany that have provided us with all these this just treasure trove of CT scans that we use. And so I think that if our lives are being enriched by exposure to these extraordinary individuals that are just doing such amazing things with their lives, then it has this kind of ripple effect and feedback loop for our team.
Yeah, and Robin, do you have any? I remember asking you this question the first time, but I loved it. So I'm going to ask you again. Are there any standout audience reactions in your mind from previous projects? Because I've seen it in person when people see this stuff and the effect that it has on them. It's great.
Yeah, but it's just the unexpected reactions. When you design an environment that is nothing without being populated by human beings, visitors, and when that springs to life and you start to see authentic reactions to the work, it's really rewarding, and that can be people crawling around on the floor. In the case of Grisdale Forest, it was the authenticity of some of it wasn't in fact the abandoned normal devices visitors, it was the random hikers that would stumble upon a headset in the forest and provide us with just the most raw and honest real-time expression of what they felt about the piece at that moment, and that's really encouraging. Similarly, in Hull, we once had someone in complete hysterics who was bent over in hysterics, and we couldn't kind of prise them out of this giddy loop. And it's just, in the film world, I imagine people sneaking into a cinema and catching raw reactions, or in a gallery. Yeah. But in this particular scene, I don't know. There's something about the immersive work, regardless of whether it's MLF's or whoever's. Because there's no set model, it almost offers permission for audience members to create their own ways of engaging in the work. And I think that's really beautiful, because that becomes part of the crystallization process.
Speaking of engagement, Robin, we're running out of time and I'm eating it all up selfishly. So I wanted to hand over to my colleague Tamar, because we've got some questions from our live audience members.
Oh, great. Hey.
Hello.
Tamar.
Hi. This has been such a great conversation. I feel bad interrupting, but we do have some questions. Some people have been whispering them to me throughout the time. So the first question is, Unreal Engine or Unity, what are the pros or cons of both from your perspective? Very specific.
Well, you can throw VVVV into that conversation as well. We feel as though diversity helps us with resilience, and so we've taken an approach where we embrace Unity as a tool, VVV as a tool, as well as Unreal Engine. And a lot of the time it's down to the developers that are available to us, the in-house team. We're blessed with a technical team who can turn their hand to all three, which is certainly rare. And I suppose one of the kind of aspects of what we've accumulated over the years in terms of our organization's culture of just being mindful that, each have got their strengths. Certainly in terms of the cinematic production values, Unreal Engine are certainly going full on into virtual production, but it's not binary by any means, and I think that better for the work and the emotion and you can get as long as you can get the idea across, it doesn't necessarily matter. And they're all going to be updated next year and the year after anyway. So as soon as you've learned one, there's a new update.
It's always changing.
Where you have to just start it.
They're iterating as much as we are.
Indeed.
That actually links on to another question in the chat, which is asking how you keep up to date and trained up with the latest developments in tech and gaming. Is this usually through R&D, or do you have like formal training?
It's through R&D, but lots of the team are formally trained as well. There's 24 MLF people, so developers as well as producers and people involved in the touring, and so there's quite a lot of us. 3 creative directors, which is pretty heavy in terms of, but it's just how we are. I can't remember what the question was now, but
just asking how you keep up to date.
Yeah, so keeping up to date through R&D as well. R&D is so essential. It's we've always got an aspect of R&D going on. And that's one of the great things about the commercial work as well. Forces this speed R&D process. Some R&D that we haven't talked about, for example, that was part of the Dream, a strand of the Dream Audience of the Future research was how we make the Metaverse tactile. So tracking deformable objects, asking questions like, why is this trackpad a steel or aluminium trackpad? Or a glass iPad, the things that you interact with, why can't you squidge it? Why can't they be organic and tactile and warm and fuzzy or flexible? And we've explored that a lot. And I think in the background, carrying out just exploring those questions and allowing us to pick up Unreal Engine or pick up Unity and just try and push and pull it. It's weird. It enriches the organization in very strange ways. One of the R&D aspects that we've done over the pandemic was a project trying to, a project streaming motion capture skeletal data. And one aspect of that we cherry picked and have used on a whole swathe of new projects as well. So R&D, the kind of, it's the river that flows and helps us as an organization, and it enriches us in many different ways.
Also to interrupt, I forgot to touch upon, Robin, but the learnings from that particular Dream project will be shared later in the year as well, which, I mean, Serpentine Arts Technologies are incredibly interested in learning more because it was such a huge R&D project. But I guess also from our perspective too, and we do so much, as you said, R&D is so valuable through that adjacency, working with other collaborators. You pick up these skills and teach each other all the time.
You do. In the case of the findings from the Audience of the Future project, we are sharing that towards the end of the year. And there are loads of really niche subjects covered. So art direction, producing for XR, things like sound design, sound production, games engine, optimization for streaming, really kind of hopefully useful to people interested.
That's really generous, and one of the things that we're really passionate about too is like sharing our skills, sharing our knowledge. So it's really empowering that you're doing that.
Thank you, Robin. We're basically at time now, so I just wanted to say thank you so much for speaking with us. And once again, major fangirl moment for me, because I've been an admirer of MLF before even moving to the UK from Australia. It's been an absolute privilege speaking to you. So thank you so much. And of course, thank you for being a Phase 2 contributor. And we're eagerly awaiting this this learnings report later in the year. It's very exciting.
Well, brilliant. And as I said, I really value your time and thank you. I'm a huge fan of the Serpentine. In fact, the whole organisation is. So yeah, and I really I look forward to the next talk.
Absolutely. We've got Phase 3 to organise. We'll have to get you involved. And thank you to our audience tonight as well. This is officially our last Phase 2 live, but we have extra ones coming up in the future connected to our broader Arts Technologies program, like the one for Freeze next Monday. So thank you. See you all next time.